Took me long enough to get this thing out. Unfortunately, a couple others beat me to the punch, but whatever, we either do this now or not at all, because what I have lined up next is a positive review of, something. Not sure what exactly. We first have to start off with some backstories. Back in the 90s, it wasn't really all that uncommon to see expansion packs for your freshly minted 1.5-inch floppy. Kicker is you never truly know the quality of the expansion in question. Sometimes you get really good ones, in which case they'd be made by the parent company themselves, or they could be made by a third-party mercenary company, which would take me too long to list every single one. It's actually kind of crazy. For this video, I'll be reviewing Duke 3D's Nuclear Winter expansion, and oh, let me tell you, it's kind of a trip. So this expansion opens up with a cutscene that explains the plot. Santa's elves became feminists and took over his workshop. No, I'm not kidding. That's the storyline. And now you have to destroy them and save Christmas. Well, here's the first level called Deja Vu, and honestly it's a beyond apt title considering that they go to the copy and paste school of game design. Basically, they took the second level of the main game and put it as the first level of this expansion. It really makes the first level very difficult to talk about because there's not much to talk about, or at least nothing new except for maybe tougher enemies that you find later in the main game. Well, I guess the one exception is that you're going to be doing it in reverse.
Baby.
And wouldn't you know it, they did it again for the second level, which is actually the first level of the main game. So of course, the same issue of being unable to really talk about it persists. However, they do introduce the new elves in this one. There's at least 2 variants that I know of. One dual wields machine guns and can take your health down to nothing in no time flat, and the other one's a shotgunner that's not much of a threat. They honestly kind of break the balance of the game a little. They have a pretty decent chance of dropping presents. Reds from the blue suits and green from the machine gunners. The green ones drop weapons, and the red ones drop health and armor, so really shortages of both those kind of supplies are not an issue in this expansion. Oh, and there's carolers, one of which sounds like Kurt Cobain's understudy.
What fun it is to ride in a...
Annoying.
Now it's on to the first proper wintry level, the Land of Forgotten Toys. So first we need to talk about a couple of things about this level. The first issue is that this is one of those levels that requires all 3 key cards to get out of, which is fine. It's not even that big of a deal, but the issue here is that the 2 areas that you get the first 2 key cards are kind of a joke. And not in the way that the developers intended. So let's tackle the first one. The first one is literally just a copy and paste of the opening area of the first level in Doom. I mean, look at it. It's way too accurate for it to be a reconstruction. Usually in all the reconstructions I've played, that there's usually something out of place. But not here. This is really good. So either they really knew their stuff, or they basically lifted the line definitions and copied and pasted over to the build level editor. But the second area is this weird teleporter puzzle, which requires you to drop down pipes, but every time you do, you take fall damage, and once you get to the bottom, you find Mario, or I guess Linguini, playing Linguini Kart. So here's the thing, parody and satire are fine, but you need to at least reach the quality of even their worst titles. This expansion doesn't, and that leads to an ironic situation where you realize that both series are enjoying current relevance. Well, Duke Nukem ultimately languishes in the basement of Randy Pitchford. Was that too soon? God, I hope not. Then there's the biggest issue that this episode has. The trip bomb traps that you can't see until you're about a flyspecker's length away. Seriously, they're very prolific in this episode. So you get done with that level, and then comes in the proper Santa's Workshop environment. And it ain't that bad, but get used to it because it's the general aesthetic of the expansion from here on out, with any exception of a random sewer level in between. So we enter Santa's corporate HQ, which is kind of funny, I suppose, if you take it as a satirical take on how commercialized Christmas has become, but then you bust out in a mixture of amused and insane laughter from not only the attempt to cope with the mental torture of playing this expansion, but you realize that this expansion was probably sold for far more than it was worth back in the day. Honestly, this fourth map isn't actually all that bad, but it's a little confusing to get around, but once you figure it out, it's got a decent flow. Dear God, I didn't think I was going to say something positive about this mod, but expansion. Whatever, it feels like a mod. Oh, remember that random sewer level that I talked about? Yeah, this. That's literally the fifth map. Play literally any other game and you get the same experience. If your game has a sewer level, it's all going to play the same. Tight quarters, maze-like design, a little too confusing, kind of just boring to look at and play. Honestly, it's been done to death. The sixth map is Santa's Christmas Village, and it's really weird because it's so isolated from the corporate HQ and war room that you kind of realize the sewer level does what it was supposed to do and basically act as filler. Overall, it's an okay level, but it's so chock full of hit scanners and tanks, not to mention a confusing layout that you really don't want to push through at this point, especially with that damn stock Christmas music going on in the background. Well, it's finally the last level of this expansion. It's Santa's Workshop. So I don't mind putting the cart before the horse, or the meat wagon in front of the boss in this case, as long as the arena is separate from the rest of the level. But in this level, the arena is the level, and you have to go through hell to even get to the boss. Usually standard, but at least you get that one room grace area that gives you a ton of supplies to carry on. But here you don't get any of that, so if you use any of the supplies that was in the outside areas of the level, then you're just going to have to go on without. When you finally do get to the boss, they pull one of the most dickish moves I've seen in a while, and no, it isn't the exceptionally amateur voice acting.
So you have found my secret plans. Now you must die.
See, they pit you against a glorified bot with a shit ton of health. So he has almost all the weapons that you have in a very skinny hitbox, and while I can work with this, his movement just feels off. Just look.
Santa. It's not nice to shoot Santa.
Oh, well, when you finish blasting the baubles off of him, you get the ending. Impressive, I know. Honestly, this is one of the worst expansions I've ever played, which is also ironic because getting the footage for this video marks it the third time I've played through this expansion. And let me tell you, I laughed, I cried, I'm fairly certain it gave me an upset stomach and kicked my dog. But none of that matters because the other issues that have plagued this turns it from a bad expansion to a singularity of shit. The issue comes in that some cases they are replacement sprites, but they never really fix the hitboxes, so you're going to encounter a lot of situations where you shoot an enemy, but the projectile just passes right through them.
Bullshit.
And don't even get me started on the stock Christmas music. Look, I actually don't hate Christmas, I quite like it, but the music I can take or leave. Unless it's some Harry Connick Jr., that's some good stuff. But in this case, it's just the worst MIDI renditions, and not to mention, Christmas music gets overplayed by the time December actually rolls around because it usually starts up in October. But whatever, it's in the past. I know Duke has 2 more expansions, and I do plan on playing through them and reviewing them for you guys. But I really should be going because I have to slove over another video.